Begin, a quick reminder to all our participants to join the DevToberFest group in the SAP community to register for the DevToberFest contest. We'll also be sharing a validation tutorial covering questions from all the sessions today, and the link will be available in the description box in 24 hours. You may also post your questions in the YouTube chat. Now let's welcome Sesh and Vasil. You may introduce yourself and show us what you have.
Thanks a lot, Srini, and thanks for the warm introduction. We couldn't hear you for the first half of the time, but it will be great if I can also introduce myself. So I'm Seshadri. I'm the lead product manager for SAP Build Process Automation, and I have with me Vasil, who is our lead architect in the workflow capabilities of SAP Build. And today we are going to talk about a topic that there are a lot of changes that has happened in the last couple of years, and something that our customers about, something that you have been asking about. So we would like to go dive deep into it, share a lot about it. So what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about um, the roles and authorizations SAP Build Process Automation. And it's a developer's guide, so we will have at least 25-30 minutes of something showing in the system. But we do have a lot of PowerPoint presentations just to explain the concepts. Just bear with us for the first 15-20 minutes or so. All right, and to dive into the session, so we will be talking about the pre-delivered role collection. What have we delivered that comes out of the box with the service, and how you can effectively use them. For that, you need to understand what they are. What are these role collections? What are they meant for? So that we will talk a lot about it, and this is where we'll have most of the slides. And then we talk about the whole authorization and the security concept that is there in the build process automation. When the service launched 4 years back, it had certain capabilities, but over the last year or so, it has enhanced further, which we want to emphasize more in today's session, which Vasil would be handling it. And finally, we sum up with key takeaways and probably from our side to start the next process automation project. Before we go in, just a very brief introduction about SAP Build Process Automation for those of you who are not aware, or also to re-emphasize on what SAP Build Process Automation is about. If you look at SAP Build as a whole, so SAP Build is a plethora of capabilities that are available for application development, extension development, workflows, agents, and workspaces or work zones. So it has all the capabilities, and within SAP you have the low-code applications as well, the build code and the JavaScript. You can basically write all of these. Even ABAP Cloud is part of it. And today we are focusing on SAP Build, which is a look to create, manage workflows, business rules, automations, and dashboards. And this is, like I said, it's a no-code application. You can see it in the video that is playing on the right-hand side. That's a very simple tool to use to create workflows. And we have a lot of AI capabilities built in already that is available for you as part of Joule for developers. You can use for free today and until 2026, mid of 2026. And there are a lot of AI capabilities that are planned for the future as well that we are super excited about. And one of the USP of the SAP Build Process Automation is the pre-built content. We have hundreds and hundreds of pre-built content available across the domains, across the use cases. And these are not just one simple workflow, but they are a full solution which has UI, slots, connectors, decisions, or business rules. So everything there for the end-to-end solution. So for you to quickly get started into it. Let's dive into the topic we are discussing today, which is about why should you care about authorization as a developer, as an administrator, as a solution architect. I mean, there are a lot of things, but first thing that comes to our mind is adhering to the company's policies and audits. And there is no brainer. This is absolutely needed in any development project that you're working on. You need to adhere to the company's policy, your client's policy, and auditing that you want to have. You wouldn't want to give, developer rights in production environment, for example. So this is something that is absolutely needed. So you need to know what capabilities that are there as part of BTP, as part of SAP Build Process Automation, and how best to adhere to the company's policy. And the next 2 points are more comes together. You want to protect your IP, right? So you don't want the access given to everyone in the organization or different departments at single sub account. So you wouldn't need to do that. So it's like a digital lock. You protect and you only grant just enough access that is needed, and for those who need access and no more. But finally, from my point of view, a security aware developer are most valued, are valued a lot more. So that's also builds in that knowledge that helps you to build a process which is scalable as well, and projects that are maintainable for the future. So that with that as a motivation, let's look at what capabilities or what roles that are pre-delivered as part of process automation. So let me go into the BTP cockpit, and I'm in one such cockpit. The sub-account administrator access, so I can see a lot of information, but I want to go into the role collections under the security section. And this is where you would basically get all the role collections that are available in this sub-account. So I have subscribed to certain capabilities. If I go to the instance and subscription, I have subscribed to Process Automation, Business Application Studio, and SAP Build Workzone Standard Edition. These are three services that are there in my system. And each of these would come with certain role collections. And there are certain role collections that are available by default in the BTP sub account. If you look at the connectivity, destination, so on and so forth, similarly, you have the sub account administrator, viewer, etc. These are that are coming with the BTP. When you subscribe to BTP or you have your sub account created, you have these automatically added. And with these privileges, an administrator could be set. Say I have a service, then I can go ahead instances and subscriptions as an example. But once you subscribe to process automation, so I've added a filter for process automation here, you could see that there are a few role collections that are available. I mean, we started with a few role collection. We only had 3 role collection when we started with the service a few years back. Now we have a lot more. So let's go into the details back into the presentation to go into the details about each of these role collection. So let's start with process automation participant role collection. And let me pull up all the 5 role collections that are pre-delivered. And if you look at a participant, if you look at the profile of the persona, who's this participant? They are an end user, usually in a production tenant, and they interact with the application that starts the process, or they work on the process by approving, submitting the form, so on and so forth, that interacts with the process, right? So that's their day-to-day life and day-to-day work, and they typically access it from the SAP Build Workzone, and which means a participant, a process automation participant, they have access to tasks via My Inbox and Task Center application. So they go into the My Inbox. Here I have a screenshot of My Inbox. You go into the task, and then I get to see the tasks, and then they can approve or reject or submit or perform any activity over there. So this is the basic access that they have. But other than that, they don't have any access. Going back into the cockpit, if I go into the process automation participant, you see there are a lot of roles that are assigned to them as well. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to go into the details about each and every role here. If you look into the expert, you will have a different set of roles. You have a developer, you have more roles. So if you are going to admin, you have 17 different roles that are there. So today we are not going to look into the detailed role, but we are only going to focus on the role collection. So that is the process automation participant, an end user. Recently, we also introduced a new role collection and a new persona called process automation expert. So who are these? What are they? Right. So here we are going in the direction of increased privileges. So they have a little bit more privilege than a participant because of their persona's definition. They are an end user. They can do whatever the participant could do, basically to access the inbox task. They will be able to approve. They will be able to start a process, so on and so forth. But they are also a business process owner or a subject matter expert. And they interact with the process, and they also know how a process should run. Whether they are running fine or not is their responsibility. Not as an administrator, but they have certain KPIs. What is the end-to-end cycle time? How many processes have completed within the cycle time that is needed for the business? So these kind of KPIs they would want to access to. So that is what this person is about. So they have access to the task, like I said, they work on it. They have access to inbox in the task center, but they also have access to KPIs, but not every KPI that is in the system. But there are specific KPIs that the developer or the administrator would be assigned. Maybe a user would only get access to, let's say in this case, a fixed asset creation. Maybe another expert will only have access to order related KPIs or invoice related. So they won't have access to everything, but only things that have been enabled for them. But they won't be having access to the lobby, which is the development environment. Because they are not a developer, they are still an end user. And if you look at a participant and an expert, these are typically the users who are there in the production environment. Yep. Let's go into the next one. Again, a newer role collection that is there for a few months now, which is the process automation delegate. So here we are getting into a developer role. So this is more in the most likely in the development environment, maybe even in the production environment as well. But this is a developer without privilege of any development activity like creating a project, maybe monitoring it, by default. They won't have access to it until they are explicitly granted access to a specific project or environments. As a delegate, you can go and do it in the lobby, but you need to be given access to a specific project, and within that project, you could perform the development activities. Maybe you can create a new process, or you can change the process, you can change a decision, you can deploy them, right? So these kind of capabilities can be explicitly given, and that is a delegate role. So this is a developer, but with a certain limited privileges. Of course, they are also an end user, especially if you're an employee of a company. Everybody needs to have access to the inbox or the task center, those who requires to work on the tasks. But at the same time, you would also want to do it in the development environment. You want to check whether the processes that you are developing, it's creating the tasks in the inbox or the task center. So you would want to have access to it. So they do have access to the task. They do have access to the KPIs as a developer to check if things are working fine. And they also have access to lobby, but they cannot access certain things. Like, for example, if you see in the screenshot, maybe I'll explain it soon, you will not be able to create net new projects, but you will be able to work on a project for which you have access to. So that is a delegate. So they have more access than an expert, and they are more closer to a developer. Then comes the process automation developer role, who has the complete access to create a project and access specific applications, specific resources. They can release, deploy projects. they can monitor instances, etc. But here also, again, a developer can do all this, but depending on what they are allowed for access, the developer also, the admin allows it, the process automation admin allows it. They are the one who defines the entire security concepts. We'll come to that shortly. But depending on what they have been allowed, the developer will be able to create net new project, create new action projects, which are basically the connectors, and they will be able to deploy it, execute it, and monitor it. So obviously they will have access to the tasks. As a developer, you need to check, and they will be access to the KPIs that they are responsible for, and they will be able to create projects. You can see that there is a create button coming up, and they will be able to monitor it. They will have more access in the lobby, so on and so forth. And finally, the administrator, who's the super user in process automation, and they are responsible for setting up the whole governance, setting up the main the projects and configure and make sure that it aligns with the company's policy, the security guidelines that has been set for the organization. So here you can't expect a lot of administrator, a lot of user with the administrator access, maybe a very few user, one or two, depending on the number of developers or the team size. But they are responsible for setting up the whole process. And we also have the concept of governance. So it's built in SAP Build Process Automation. So they can also set up rules which says what can the user access. So if I quickly go into the SAP Build lobby, so I have two screens here on purpose. On the left-hand side, I have the user with the delegate role. On the right-hand side, I have a user with an administrator role. Yeah. So I just want to very briefly talk about what they can do. As you can see in a delegate, they cannot create and if you look at, they only have access to, let's say, 20 projects, but ideally there are 55 projects that are there in the system that can be administrator. And the reason is the delegate has been given access to only certain projects. And if I go into the control tower as an administrator, this is where the configuration everything happens. And you can see administrators got a lot of apps to this. But if I go into the delegate role, you only have certain specific ones. Same goes with the monitoring as well. So if I just log in, yeah, so I get to see more applications, etc. Yeah, so that's the whole difference between an administrator, developer, and a delegate. But let us look at it a little bit more detail. So the administrator will be able to have access to everything. However, it is not recommended. Just to summarize the difference between admin, developer, and a delegate, there are different things and there are different responsibilities for each of these roles. So if you look at, there are specific configuration that are available only for admin, like I said, in the control cover to allow what destination in a process. And Vasil will be talking about API keys shortly. So who can create this? Or create an environment. Again, we will be coming in a few moments about environments. So administrator can do all of that and then assign who can access them. And of course, technically, an administrator could create a project, could deploy a project, could share a project, transport a project, etc. But that is not their primary purpose. Of course, if you have only 3 users in the entire unit and you want an admin and a developer individual as a persona, technically it is possible for an admin to create a project, even work on a project and contribute to it, etc. But it is not recommended if you want to have a clear scope of who does what. So that is a job of a developer. And then comes the delegate, who is also like a developer, but they cannot create net new project or an action project or an event project, but rather they will be able to contribute towards a project which a developer has created and shared with the delegate user. Right, so that's the main difference between the three users. So we highly recommend you to start using these three users and the three role collections. Set up the security concept fairly for your organization, for your needs, and not always give the admin rights or the developer rights to everyone in the. All right. And, the other thing I want to also briefly touch upon before we go to show the demos, it's about the standard user and advanced user. I mean, you wouldn't come across this as a developer. Admin, but this is quite important mainly because depending on what kind of user they are charged, because SAP Build Process Automation licensing is user-based, which means depending on who or what kind of a user is accessing the service, we calculate how much the customer has to pay for it. So that's why we have a segregation of a standard user versus an advanced user. If you look at a standard user, they typically participate in the process. They are basically the end users and the business experts, and they are charged depending on the usage tier, the number of users who are accessing, anywhere between €0.5 and €1.7 per user per month. But if you are looking at an advanced user, then it is a flat rate of €14 per month. So, and an administrator role collection, if you assign it to someone, then they will have to pay. Just for an example, if you are setting up in your production system, you have you expect 1,000 users to use the product, and you provide delegate access to everyone, then they will have to pay 1,000 times 14,000 euros per month if all 1,000 are accessing the system. Okay, so that's something that you need to be really careful on. And how do you identify what it is? Again, going back to the BTP cockpit, and if you look at the process automation admin role collection and you get to see the different roles, you see there is an advanced user role that is added. And so is and the expert, so you can use collection that you can use for the project. This is already great. However, if you are a developer, you're a delegate, there are a lot of other capabilities that can also be enabled for you. And that is where the project-specific access, runtime access also comes into picture, where you can give more granular privileges, more granular access to it. For that, I will hand it over to Vasil to take you through the whole concept of the runtime role access and designing role access.
Thank you, Sesh. Let me share my screen. So, indeed, it is not unusual that several people in a company have access to the SAP Build lobby and can develop something there. But these people do not necessarily belong to the same departments or organizations. And people who develop something for the HR department do not necessarily want to share what the intermediate states or even the details of what they're doing with the people from the other departments. And here is where the fine-granularly assigned privileges on the project level come into play, which are offered by SAP Build Process Automation. And there are several levels of privilege which can be assigned to a project, to an individual or a group working on the project, and the weakest privilege level is the viewer. So these users will only be able to view the project contents and won't be able to modify anything. But what they will be able to do is deploy already released versions, but this is the only capability they have. So this is usually the privilege which is assigned to project managers or business stakeholders or auditors, QA personnel, or junior team members. The next privilege, the developer, and these are the people who actually design and build the processes and automation. Administrator is the heaviest and the most important role or privilege. These people of the project, including governance and deployment. So this privilege is usually assigned to lead developers, solution architects, and DevOps personnel. So, and usually we recommend to stick to the least privilege principle so that the people can proceed with the tasks they are assigned. Without further ado, let me go into the system. And here as well, I'm logged in on the left-hand side with the user who has process automation delegate role collection assigned. And on the right, or on the back side, so a user with the process automation developer role collection assigned. And here right away, you can see that both of them can view the projects, the list of the projects available in the system. However, only the developer has the opportunity to create a new one. Let's do that. And so we are going to create the one which is based on the process and give it a name, DevToberfest project. So the project has been created. And right away, I am going to create a process inside of that. Add a trigger. So this will be really process start and end upon a trigger. And I release the first version of this process or project. Sorry. So we are done with our preparations on the right-hand side as a developer. So now let's check what do we see in the overview of the projects as a developer. The first project which we can see is the DevToberfest project. So, and let's check what is available there. And apparently delegate, I don't see the by the developer. Why is that? The reasoning behind as follows. So if we go into the member configuration for this particular project, we can see several options or several areas, and one of them is general access. So, and here for general access, we have a setting only project members can interact with this project. Let's change it right away and set it to everyone with access. And everyone with access would get the viewer privilege here. So let's save it and let's as the delegate. So now as a delegate, I can see the project created. However, this is not what I wanted to proceed with. And let's revert this back to the initial setting, only project members. So delegate doesn't see the project. And now as the developer, I'm going to fine granularly assign this privilege to the privileges of interest to the delegate. And so it is possible to do that in different ways. One of them would be to do it directly to the individual users, and this is what I'm going to demonstrate here. However, it is also possible to do that working with the whole groups of the users. For the member I now add the viewer privilege, save it, and check what changed for the delegate. So now delegate sees the project and can interact with that. What does it mean can interact with that? So we can compare the differences between in the overview of the project, what can the developer do and what can the delegate do. So here it becomes apparent that on the developer side, so on the developer side, I can create artifacts with can import, I can generate, and opportunities are not given to me as the delegate who is only assigned the viewer privileges. So in order to overcome that, I'm give developer privileges to the delegate. And by the way, what I forgot to mention here is that as the developer, we created this project. So therefore, by default, we are assigned administrator privileges for it. Yeah. So now as I have administrative privileges in the project, and as a delegate, I have developer privileges on the project. And now if I update the system for the delegate, the view for the delegate, I can see that also here I can create the individual artifacts. I can import and generate. So now what is the difference between the delegate privilege between the administrative privileges and developer privileges? So as with on the right, what I can do is I can manage the members and they can check as a whole. I'm not going to here you can with developer privileges. I do not have this opportunity at all. So having said that, please note that now we were working only with the design time artifact. So we created something just for the sake of the presentation. I released something, but we haven't deployed anything, executed anything, and this is where the environments and runtime authorizations come into play. So it's quite often the case that when the users want to deploy something into the productive, deploying and into the with the productive scenario, what they would like to do is they would like to try it out and deploy the prepared work into the pre-prod. And now it's a bit of a recursive definition. What is an environment? Environment is basically a deployment and runtime context. And one could imagine that an environment is just a bucket where the individual versions of deployed individual versions of the projects land when they're getting deployed. And if subsequently there are there are new instances of these versions of the artifacts from these versions which are getting started, they also belong to the same bucket, so that the entities in the buckets do not interfere with each other. In the different buckets do not interfere with each other. So as of today, the system or SBPA supports the shared environments, so where there is fine granularity of access to the environments and entities in them, and the public environment. So public environment is basically a singleton which is available to everybody. However, the public environments are deprecated. They are there only for the backward compatibility with the times when SAP Build didn't have the concept of environments, and therefore we have so our guidance in this in regards of environments would be to actually avoid the public environment. And there are two reasons for that. So the first of all, as already said, the public environment is deprecated, and mid and long term, we are planning to get rid of it completely. Secondly, more often than not, the newly introduced features are introduced so that they only support the corresponding projects to be deployed to the shared environments. So without further ado, let's get back into this system. And now I would need to log out as the delegate on the left-hand side. So I stay as a developer on the right-hand side. However, on the left-hand side, I'm going to be an administrator. So sorry for this. So now on the left-hand side, I am administrator. So the user has the process automation administrator role collection assigned to him. And I'm going into the control tower. So just for the comparison, let's go into the control tower and into the environments on the right-hand side as well to see the difference between what the administrator sees and what the developer sees. So as you see, the administrator can create new environments, and he also sees the list of all the environments available in the system. This is not the case for the developer. So developer needs to be assigned access rights to the environments of interest. And this is also the responsibility of the administrator. So now as an administrator, I'm going to create a new environment. Let's call it pre-prod. Yes, color is fine. And right away, I'm going to create a new environment, which is called prod. Just to note that it's a bit more crucial, I'm going to mark it red. And now basically we have created two new environments of type shared. Let's check what happened for the developer. And for the developer, nothing changed because we haven't done anything with the environment so that the developer sees them. In order to achieve that, what we need to do, we need to share the environment. And here I'm going to do basically the same as I did previously for the project privileges. However, I'm not going to go into the individual authorizations here, and we'll just give everything to the developer. Save it. So now the developer needs to be in position to view the pre-prod environment. This is the case. This is what we can see. Let's do the same for the prod. Now, as a developer, I need to see both of these environments. And now let's demonstrate exactly this scenario which I previously described. That so in the same system currently we have two environments, prod and pre-prod, and we're going to release two distinct versions of the project, deploy them one after another, and see that they do not interfere with each other, and that basically with the second deployment, I do not override the first deployment. So in order to do that, let's right away go into the first version, which we have already released, and deploy it into, let's do it prod. Deploy. And we can see that the deployment is successful. We can check in which environments it is. Prod is marked right away to the prod environment. And now let's do the following. We are going to go to the editable version of the project. Let's imagine we have done some changes here and we release it. And let's, for the prominence, let's say that it's a major version so that it's clear that 2 is going to be here. And so we now have the second version, and we deploy it, select. So now let's say we have a situation that in the prod environment, there is a stable version 100, which is running. And now what we want to do, we want to try it out for how it's going to work as close as possible to the productive environment. So we select the pre-prod and deploy the version 200 to it. Here we can see that the deployment is successful now. And so we can check which environments are there. And so the pre-prod environment is there. And in the pre-prod environment, there is the DevToberFest project with version 200. What's more, if we go to the process and workflows, we can see that the DevToberFest process is now with the version 200 inside of it. However, if we are in the prod environment, we can see that the DevTop first project has been deployed with 1.0.0. There has been no change to it. And for the processes and workflows, we can see that the process inside of it is the version. Having said that, one could note that up to now we have been working only with the users. So, however, more often than there is a requirement to interact with the system with SAP Build on behalf of a technical user. And so how do these environments, which are actually the deploy time and runtime artifacts, well, not artifacts, but entities, how do they play around with the technical users? And in order to see that, we are going to the Bruno, and first of all, make a request to see which workflow are there, and we can see that there is quite a bunch of them. However, if we scroll individual contents, we can see that they all belong to the environment with ID default. And what is that? Actually, the default environment is so default is a technical identifier for the public environment. So in the UIs, you're going to see it as a public environment. In the REST APIs everywhere it is exposed with the technical identifier default. And so here I made a request with the client credentials without any further interactions. What we can see are only the workflow definitions which belong to the public environment. How can I reach the point that with the technical user, I can also have access and interact with the entities which are inside of the shared environments? And in order to do that, what I need is the API key, which has been already mentioned by so now I navigate to the list of the API keys as an administrator, by the way. So only administrator can do that. This is not intended now, I need to admit. So let me try the following. Let me refresh. So usually yeah. So in another browser, it works. So I add an API key called so prod key. So here I'm in a position to assign fine granular privileges to the. Yep. So I need to hurry up. Basically. I had the API key for the prod environment, and let's try it out very quickly. So now this API key is added as a header to our request, and basically my hope would be that environment ID equals prod should be there. Unfortunately, this hasn't worked, but so it should. Due to the time constraints, I'm now handing over to Sesh. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Vasil. So let me share my screen to wrap up what we learned today. All right, so what are the key takeaways and recommendation from today's session so you can take it forward in your future process automation projects and even the current ones? First and foremost, choose the right role collection. So we have multiple role collection. So we have, delegate and expert that are with the specific privileges available, which can be used in production compared to, let's say, an administrator or a developer user. And also keep in mind that advanced user, which are the developer, administrator, and delegate, they cost a lot more than the standard user, which is the expert and the participant. So choosing the right role collection is quite important. Then, like Vasil showed, there are project level privileges. So you can protect who can access what artifacts. So this is quite important, especially when you want to expose, let's say, decision as an artifact, your business users in production environment, and you don't want them to modify other projects. And you can give them a delegate access so they can't create net new projects, but rather work on the decisions that are available within one project. So this is an example, but you could also expand it for other use cases. There are 3 privileges: viewer privileges, developer privileges, administrator privileges for a project. So you can give them appropriately based on your needs. Then you have the shared environment for runtime, which means who can access the data, who can start a workflow instance, who can execute a decision, can access the logs. So these are governed with shared environments, and this will give you more granular privileges together with the project level privileges. And finally, we have a secure integration with API keys. Unfortunately, the demo did not work today. But the idea is whenever you want to expose your artifacts, let it be to start an instance or to get the status, execute a decision, but you do not want to do via users, which means you don't have a role collection or project level privileges or share environment access for a user, but rather you want to expose it as a technical user. From a technical user point of view, you want to call it as an API, maybe the client credentials flow. In that case, we have something called as API keys, and you can create multiple API keys with the different scopes. Let's say you can have one API key in a shared environment to only create new workflow instances or execute a decision via triggers. And they could create another API key, which could be used to query the workflow logs. So you could create multiple API keys and then based on the use cases and use it appropriately to call them. And last but not the least, while calling the APIs with shared environment, you will have to provide the environment ID in the call together with the API key in the header, like Vasil showed in the Bruno, and that would help you to access the APIs in especially system to system calls. But if you're calling via password flow as a user, let's say a user logs into a system and an application in the BTP in workzone, and then they fill in some details and then start a process instance. In this case, you don't need to actually call it via a system to system API calls. Rather, you can use the user privileges to start a workflow instance. So in that case, if they have the workflow participant role, they will be able to start a workflow instances. So this is something that you can expose, and you can create a project with a wonderful security access, and you can also be compliant with your auditing and the security policies of the organization. With that, thank you so much, and we are open for any questions. Over to you, Srini, for moderating the questions.
Yeah, that was a very good session, Sheshadri and Vasil. It was very easy to understand also. There are no outstanding questions in the chat. So I have some final notes for the participants. that the validation tutorial will be updated in the YouTube description in the next 24 hours. And if you are watching the replay, you can post your questions in the comment section and we will try to answer them as soon as possible. Thank you everyone for joining us and see you in the next session, which begins in 2 hours.